Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Johns Hopkins School of Education, Doctor of Philosophy and Education virtual webinar. My name is Leena John. I'm the Assistant Director of Admissions. Also here with me, I have my colleague from the Office of Admissions, and she will introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Tanya McMillan. I am an admissions coordinator here for the PhD program at the School of Education.
We also have presenting today two current PhD students, Zyra Smith and Jody Miller, Vice Dean of Academic Affairs and Program Lead, Dr. Hunter Galbeck, and Assistant Professor, Dr. Leena John. Before we get started, I would like to cover a few housekeeping topics. First, today's webinar is being recorded. We will be able to share a link with you after the event is complete. Also, please take a second to see if your mic is on mute right now. Please have your mic on mute and video off at all times during the presentation. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Please type your question in the chat box and we will read and answer your questions. Next, I would like to share the agenda for today's presentation. We will kick off the presentation sharing an overview of the Johns Hopkins School of Education. Then Dr. Galbeck and Dr. John will go over details of the Doctor of Philosophy program. We also have two current PhD students here with us today, and we will talk about their journey at SOE. And lastly, we'll cover admissions requirements and leave the floor open for questions at the end. And to start, we are one of 9 schools at Johns Hopkins University. We began offering college courses for teachers in 1909 and then became our own school in 2007. We are proud to share that the Johns Hopkins School of Education is consistently ranked one of the top schools in education by the U.S. News and World Report. For school enrollment, we have approximately 2,465 students and offer more than 30 graduate programs, which includes doctoral, master's, and graduate certificate programs. And we also have a strong network of over 22,000 SOE alums. Moving on to faculty presenters. Dr. Hunter Galbeck is a program lead and vice dean of academic affairs at the Johns Hopkins School of Education. He joined SOE in 2019, received his PhD at Stanford University. His research focuses on improving the social and motivational context of schools and received the Spencer Foundation Mid-Career Award in 2016. Also presenting today, we have Dr. Leena John, Assistant Professor at the Johns Hopkins School of Education. Dr. John received her PhD at Ohio State University. Her research focuses on early childhood care and education, family characteristics and neighborhood, and was the AERA SRCD Early Career Fellow in Early Childhood Education and Development in 2017. And before we go over the program details, I would like to cover a frequently asked question. What is the difference between the EDD and the PhD program? And to summarize what's on this chart, our PhD program is a full-time, approximately 4 to 5 year program requiring residency in Baltimore, Maryland. Typically, the program is designed for those who are pursuing research positions or continuing research and teaching at the college or university level. There's also a strong focus towards on researching and contributing new information to the field of education. On the other hand, our EDD program is a part-time online program. Completion time is approximately 3 to 4 years, and this program is designed for individuals who are practitioners within their fields. Most EDD programs are focused on preparing students for administrative leadership roles. The EDD program includes, but of course not limited to, leadership in higher educational institutions, school districts, nonprofit organizations, government agencies, and private sector positions. And typically, our EDD students choose to narrow their studies to something directly applicable to their current job or a role they're aspiring to obtain. At this time, I would like to hand the floor over to Dr. Galbeck and Dr. John to discuss details of the Doctor of Philosophy and Education program at the Johns Hopkins School of Education.
Thanks so much, Joan. I'm not sure if we were going to do videos, but I'm happy to have mine turned on if you want. I leave that to your discretion. Thanks everyone so much for coming. It's great to have you here. Really appreciate you taking the time. As we think about sort of the program objective, and as you can read it up there on the screen, it is, you know, if you do the word cloud on this, it is not a shock that research shows up multiple times, whether we're sort of getting people set for research scientist kind of positions, regular assistant professor, tenure track, research intensive university kind of pathways, research institutes. We are very much a research-centered kind of place. But I think maybe the better thing to sort of articulate and to talk through is that I think the thing that really maybe distinguishes Hopkins is on the ground, we really think about impact. And so how is your research going to have impact? That's kind of the discussions that you would find yourself hearing in the hallways. And so yes, the training you're going to get and the focus is going to be very much geared toward these sorts of positions, but it is always within a larger context and within a conversation around how are you, really, how is your research really making progress and getting traction on real world problems. And so then on the next slide, as we sort of think about, well, you could do research on lots of things. What are particular people focused on? I think it's pretty fair to think of us as sort of approximately divided into sort of a number of faculty who focus on education policy. There's a strong sort of sociology group within the faculty, thinking about the social context of learning, and then as well as a learning science and educational psychology group. We are starting to sort of tiptoe into thinking about economics of education a little bit, but do not have a lot of faculty in that domain, at least not just yet. And so as you guys are thinking about sort of your particular personal research focus, and does that map onto faculty here, I think it is worth noting that we really do adhere to an apprenticeship model. And part of what you want to do as your research, certainly for our program, but for other programs as well, is think about connecting with a faculty member who you perceive your interests might align with their interests, and having a conversation with them and talking through if indeed, what you're sort of reading on the website does seem like a good fit with you and your needs and interests. And with that, I will let Leena kind of take over on the next slide. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm gonna give you some background information overview of program features and our curriculum. So the PhD program is designed to be a 4-year program, but we have some students taking 5th year. So basically, students have fully funded fellowship up to 4 years, and this includes tuition coverage and a stipend. And students are also provided with individual health, vision, and dental insurance. For the 5th year, most of our students work with an advisor or other faculty to secure funding outside of that 4-year fellowship. And as part of the training, students will be required to complete 2 teaching assistantships. So that can be also helpful for students to build some teaching experience on their CV. Could you advance to the next slide? Our program requires a minimum of 72 credits. Yeah, thank you. A master's degree is required, and students may petition for up to 12 credits of master's level coursework to be transferred to this part of 72 credits. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is an overview of our curriculum structure. You can see here that we require a wide range of things from research methods and statistics courses, core seminars, major and or minor area electives and readings, and dissertation research. For the methods and statistics course, we offer various sequence of basic statistics, research landscape, and data workflow, and also wide range of advanced methods and statistics, including survey research, quantitative related advanced stats, or qualitative methodology. And our core seminars also include very interdisciplinary courses that Hunter mentioned in terms of faculty research focus. So students will be exposed to some coursework on science of learning, basically learning sciences, education psychology, sociology, or multicultural perspectives, and also education policy. Next slide, please. Yeah, and students are supposed to complete the comprehensive exam before the beginning of year 3. So our rising third year students completed it during this past summer. Dissertation proposal defense is mostly completed during year 3 towards the end of spring semester or summer, but it varies a little bit depending on students' progress in the program. And doctoral dissertation and oral defense are mostly completed by the end of year 4 or 5. I think now I'm gonna turn this over to Hunter again.
Great, thanks, Leena. So as you kind of, we wanted to give you guys a little sense of sort of dissertation topics, and Jody and Zyra will give us a better sense of some of what current students are up to. But the things that I thought would be useful to just sort of flag and point out here is kind of the range of research that is being conducted by our students, all of which I think is really exciting, and all of which I hope you can kind of see that, what I was saying before about the using research to really leverage and get some real world impact. And so, you know, whether we're talking pregnant teenagers and what some of the contextual factors are that might impact their academic achievement, or some examinations of big data sets and some of the things you can do there, and questions that can be asked, or debate league, and does that actually help your academic achievement as a student if you're participating in those, all the way down to some really neat studies that were done with Bob Slavin's lab around, you know, gosh, what happens if we give kids glasses and actually let them see the board better? Do they learn more? Spoiler alert, turns out the answer is yes. And so hopefully, again, that gives you a little sort of sense and flavor. And again, in this sort of vein of trying to be sort of impactful and pragmatic, I think increasingly, one of the things you'll see with our dissertation studies is this trend toward a 3-article dissertation. And basically what that means for you as you're working your way through the program is that you're getting publications out along the way, rather than what's maybe a more traditional dissertation model where you're sort of writing this huge tome, and then at the end of it, you either need to convert it to a book or sort of deconstruct it back down into journal articles. And so the hope is we're just helping to position our graduates or our students as they graduate, positioning them in a bit better position on the job market. And actually, on that note of the job market, on the next slide, you'll get a little bit of a flavor of what some of our, you know, very recent and longer term alumni are up to. And it really spans sort of government work, nonprofit, research scientists, postdoc kinds of positions, one of whom actually stayed here and is doing great, and then sort of classic academic positions. And so again, the common thread here is going to be that because the training is really very much research oriented, that, you know, these are not surprisingly the positions people end up heading into. All right, so a little, as we flip to the next slide here, and maybe a tiny bit less formally, I hinted before at how important this idea of fit is. And so Leena and I sort of each took the liberty of picking out like our top 3 things that, you know, if we were to be sort of in your position thinking through, gosh, is Hopkins the right program? Is it a good fit? What should you be looking for? And so I'll start with my top 3 and then hand it over to Leena. So I think one thing that's kind of distinctive about Hopkins, and that probably ought to be something that you're looking for if you're seriously considering us, is this apprenticeship experience. So most everyone here, and Jody and Zyra can speak to this a little bit more later, most everyone here is working pretty tightly with their advisor. For sure, there are occasions where students are kind of working in between a couple different folks, and that's encouraged as well. But the bulk of your learning really is happening through this very sort of like individualized mentoring. So I think that's a big one for sussing out if that's the kind of experience you want to have. This is a great place. Second, you want to learn research approaches of the future. All right, I need to unpack this a little bit. So particularly in psychology, and I think it's kind of on the cusp of happening in education, there are increasing numbers of concerns around validity of findings and validity of data. And I hope and assume that everyone on the call here would agree with the following statement, which is that good researchers, good educational researchers, will thoroughly examine their data. And at the same time, I hope we would all agree with the statement that no good educational researcher should flog their data so long and so hard that it tells them exactly what they want to hear. But the line between thorough analysis and flogging your data until it tells you what you want it to hear, what you want to hear from it, that's a thin line. And so increasingly there's sort of this move toward open science practices where researchers are just more transparent about all these tiny little decisions that can end up making a big difference. And so all this to say, I think Hopkins is a great place to learn about these sort of really cutting edge and I think where the future of educational research is headed, these open science kinds of approaches. And so it's just, I think, sort of the latest evolution in scientific practice, where we're going to be able to have a lot more faith when we go and put some research in front of a principal or a district leader. We're just going to be able to have a lot more faith that this is a real finding and it's not some fluke that happened by chance, and that if other people try to replicate it, the odds would be pretty good that we actually find some replication. So open science is sort of the shorthand from it, but I think this is another really good signal for fit. Like if this sounds appealing to you and you want to learn these new approaches and methodologies, I think Hopkins is a great place to do it. Obviously not everyone in education is on board with it, and I think a lot of our faculty are. We do have a couple skeptics, so you can kind of learn some of the critiques of this approach as well. So that's my number 2. Third and final one, you want to take advantage of research practice partnerships. So I think one of the areas where we really have some neat stuff going on is our capacity to sort of partner with with a whole wide variety of places engaged in educational practice. And so just to give a couple of examples, the Berk Baltimore Educational Research Consortium is pulling together this really kind of massive and impressive data set on youth in Baltimore, those students who are going through this public schools, but they're getting them even before they go to public schools. So they're getting super early childhood data points on them. They're getting transportation, they're getting health records. And so it's this really complete picture, and we can provide some research expertise, but then offer this guidance and actually be directed in terms of our research questions by Baltimore City Public Schools, by other city agencies to, figure out what are the big questions we need answers to. So that's one sort of neat example of research practice partnerships. I'll give a personal one. We're just teaming up with a program over on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. This is my lab, where that does mostly sort of environmental education. And they, thanks to coronavirus, have had some, real tough time trying to figure out what they do with their whole little campus. And so they're actually going to, turns out, pull a bunch of Baltimore City sixth graders onto their campus, intensive tutoring, some catch-up stuff, and see if they can get these kids from, often struggling readers to back on track. Lots of focus on social emotional learning there too. And so this is just sort of another example of one of the research practice partnerships going on within the School of Ed. And then, sorry, Leena, one last thing. Beyond the School of Education, I think this idea of research practice partnerships is really common throughout the university. And so if you have intellectual interests that sort of span from education to other areas, whether it's public health, some of the kind of classic arts and sciences areas, I think you'll find that this is really not just distinctive about the School of Education, but pretty distinctive characteristic even more broadly. So, all right, I'm done, Leena, your turn. Thanks.
Thank you, Hunter. Echoing all the points that Hunter made, I will add 3 more points here. So I would say if you're looking for an interdisciplinary approach in education, this is a really good place. As I mentioned before, our core coursework provides perspectives from learning sciences, educational psychology, sociology, educational policy, and Hunter mentioned economics and education, and also multicultural perspectives. So this is really great for students to develop perspectives from diverse and multiple disciplines. And also this interdisciplinary research is encouraged across the university, not just within School of Education. So there are a lot of opportunities for faculty and students to get involved in projects with faculty at other schools. So for example, I work with faculty at School of Medicine, School of Public Health to understand more of like students' traumatic experience using physiological measures, in School of Engineering and School of Nursing. So my students in my lab are all involved in those projects and have an opportunity to work with faculty in diverse areas. My second point is that if you're looking for a rigorous methodology training, this is also a good place. We have a very nice in-house statistics sequence, which is really good for students to learn some discipline-specific examples and data sets. Like sometimes if you take statistics courses outside of School of Education, you get to see some data sets that's less relevant to the field, but we have this in-house statistics courses where we provide a lot of education-specific examples and education-related data sets. So it's going to be much easier for you to apply to your own work when it comes to time for your own publications or dissertation work. At the same time, I want to say that we also have students taking courses from other schools like public health or other departments so that they can also get more diverse methodology training like mixed methods. So especially because we have a small group cohort in the PhD program, the method training becomes more interactive and personal. So I am personally very proud of our methodology sequence in the PhD program. My third point is quite overlapped with Hunter's third point, but this is so important, so I just added one more time here. So in our coursework, we talk a lot about how to bridge between research, practice, and policy. So if you're really interested in making impact on education practice and policy by bringing in research, this is a great place. We also have a lot of faculty doing this type of work, connecting between research and practice or research and policy. And as Hunter mentioned, research practice partnership approach. So students have a lot of opportunities to work on those projects as well. Okay, then next slide. Yeah, Hunter, I will hand this over to you.
Great, thanks so much. Sorry, I'm slow on the unmuting there. I am totally excited to A, give you a glimpse of some of our doctoral students, but B, more importantly, get us set to hear from our student speakers. So without further ado here, I would like to introduce Zyra, and she'll give you a little more thorough introduction of herself, and then we'll hand it off to Jody Miller. They're both third-year students and have, I think, a similar sort of different set of research interests, and are just among our many fabulous students, they are some of our extra most fabulous. Zyra, take it away. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Hunter. Hi, everyone. My name is Zyra Shea Smith. Everyone just calls me Zyra in the School of Education. So as Hunter said, I am a third-year student in the PhD program, and I study college access for minority and low-income students. And I am working on my dissertation proposal now, hopefully get that done by Christmas so I can begin working on my dissertation, in which I will focus on Baltimore City's high school choice program and how that affects students' college outcomes. So I'm glad you're showing interest in Hopkins, and I just wanted to give a few reasons of why I was interested in the program. So first, I actually got my master's at the School of Education here, and I had a great experience. I had some personal difficulties throughout the program, but what stood out to me was that there were faculty who actually really cared about my progress and continued to check on me and encourage me to continue my education. And so just that personal relationship that I developed with faculty in the program and the rigor of the program really stood out to me. I was also interested in this program because it was unlike a lot of PhD programs in the area, because I was geographically bound in the programs that I was interested in. So out of my options, this was the only one that allowed me to really have some flexibility in what I was interested in. Yes, I'm interested in college access, but I didn't want to be pigeonholed into a very narrow view of college access. So the fact that this program allows me to ask many questions and look at things from either a qualitative, quantitative perspective, and also include sociology in my investigation really appeals to me. And then finally, I am very practical. So again, my search for programs was geographically bound, but also as an adult, I have to be very practical about how I'm going to live. So honestly, the fact that this program is fully funded, I can live comfortably. It meant a lot. And then also with the medical and dental and vision, because I wear glasses, you can't see that from the picture, but I do wear glasses. That really helps alleviate any stress so that I can really focus on my agenda and really get through the program with my best efforts. I have more to say, but I won't take up the conversation too much. I'll be happy to answer questions towards the end. So I'm gonna pass it off. I guess I'll go back to, goes to Jody.
Thank you, Zyra. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to Jody Miller.
Hi, I'm a third year, so I am also in Zyra's cohort. My name is Jody Miller, and I'm really interested in stress and student achievement and school climate, and thinking about what can schools do to better support vulnerable learners who are exposed to trauma and poverty and challenges associated with both. So my dissertation is focused on how do we measure stress, and then also how is stress affecting achievement and other aspects of school climate that can help moderate this relationship. So when I was going through my PhD search process, what brought me to Hopkins is what you heard a little bit about earlier, is the apprenticeship model. So I am really lucky. I work with Leena and we work very closely together. And it's been a wonderful experience because she knows a lot about my work style and what I need to work on and develop as a scholar and a researcher. And I observed in other programs, you didn't necessarily have that tight connection with your advisor. And so that was really important to me. I also really like what you heard about earlier, the interdisciplinary research. I sit on this interesting position between like cognitive science and some like stress physiology and education. And I'm able to find people at Hopkins beyond the School of Education who have areas of expertise that aren't necessarily filled in a traditional education space. I've worked in a cognitive science lab. I also have a side project with someone in the econ department. So I find it really exciting that there are so many opportunities for interdisciplinary research and to find opportunities to kind of merge different fields that aren't traditionally talking to each other. And so that kind of speaks to both my second and third point, is that was something really important to me, is I am in this space where I get to learn as much as I want, and having access, and not only access, but people encourage you to explore other parts of the university in relation to your research was really exciting to me. And similar to Zyra, I'm here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you everyone for a wonderful presentation. So now we're going to continue by going over the application requirements. So applicants must submit a completed application, which can be found on our website. Keep in mind there is a $80 application fee when you submit your application. You will also need an updated resume. Next, your personal statement should not exceed more than 750 words. Please visit our website for additional information on the personal statement. In addition to the personal statement, a writing sample must be submitted, and this would be a sample of your most professional writing that demonstrates your analytical and critical writing skills. Moving on, you should plan on submitting 3 letters of recommendation, and these letters should include at least the following: 2 submitted by faculty members who are familiar with your previous academic work, and 1 by a supervisor or administrator who has been in a position to evaluate your professional development. We do need official GRE scores and official transcripts. And please keep in mind, we need all official transcripts, including institutions you may have taken courses but did not receive a degree. Again, this is from all post-secondary institutions that you have attended. And lastly, an interview may be required. And one more thing to note is that there is a prerequisite for this program, a master's degree from a regionally or nationally accredited college or university. The application deadline is December 15, 2020. So please keep in mind, we need all supporting materials submitted by this date. There are a few additional steps you need to take in order to complete the application process if you're an international student. You must submit a TOEFL or IELTS score. And please note, if you hold a qualifying degrees or have earned credits from institutions outside the US, you must have your academic records evaluated by an accredited independent credential evaluation agency before you can be considered for admission to the PhD program. And additional information can be found on our school's website. And for tuition, please note all PhD students at SOE are eligible for a fellowship for up to 4 years. The fellowship includes a yearly stipend and will cover tuition and fees. The fellowship will also cover individual health, dental, and vision insurance. And lastly, you must be registered full-time and be in good academic standing every semester to continue to be eligible for the fellowship. And if you're interested in applying for financial aid, we strongly encourage you to apply for financial aid when you start your application. Please note the recommended submission of the FAFSA application, which is next year, March 15. Please visit our website for additional information on financial aid. And if you have any questions relating to your application, please contact Tanya McMillan, and any program-related questions, please contact Raven Minervino, and then of course, Dr. Galbeck and Dr. John. Thank you for attending the Doctor of Philosophy and Education virtual webinar. At this time, we would like to open up the floor for questions. Please type your question in the chat box. So the very first question we received is, if you did not have access to former instructors, are there any other letters of recommendation that are acceptable for the application? So we are able to accept a professional reference in place of the academic reference. The next question we have is, if I have a master's degree in a different field, will I still be considered?
Maybe I'll take that one. So I don't think there's any burning need to make sure that you have a master's degree in education. But I think certainly what I would look for, and Leena could speak to this too, is going to be some sense of a coherent track, right? And so if you're really interested in focusing on the psychology of little children, then either like a developmental psychology or some other kind of psych background, you know, it would make a ton of sense. And so that would all seem very logical to us. And I think that would be viewed favorably. You know, if your master's degree is in a completely different field from what you want to do and go into, then I think there would be a little more onus on you to come up with a compelling story about how that prior master's degree is sort of shaping or helping form what it is you want to pursue moving forward, if there's at least sort of on the surface a big disconnect there. Leena, would you add anything to that?
No, I think I completely agree. I think like alignment and justification of what you're interested in, that would be important instead of just having a master's degree in education field.
Okay, the next question we have is, can we have recommendation letters only from work supervisors? So if you're unable to get an academic reference from a former professor, then certainly you can use a professional letter of recommendation in lieu of that.
I might just jump in and say one or two other quick things, which is, you know, I think we've stressed pretty well in the presentation, right? It is very much a research-oriented program, and so I think the challenge of only recommendation letters from work supervisors would be making sure that someone somewhere in your portfolio, in your dossier that you submit, is able to speak to your sort of capacity to do research. And just to touch on what I think was, you know, sort of a question in sort of the same vein, how fully formed do we need our research question to be upon application? Again, I'll be curious to see what Leena's thoughts are, but to me, I think there's a little bit of a balance to strike, because if you sort of come across to the committee as saying, I have this precise research question and this is exactly what I want to study and nothing else will cut it for me. And so if I can't study this, I'm going to, you know, storm off and be really frustrated with the program. Like, that's maybe a little too narrow. By the same topic, like, you know, I'm really interested in social emotional learning, so I want to study that. That's probably a little too broad. And remember that your application will sort of get read in the context of folks who are able to articulate pretty sophisticated research questions. And so to me, maybe the balance is to think about the types of research questions that you would be interested in pursuing. So you could spell them out pretty explicitly, but then show maybe a range of like, these 2 or 3 questions are the things that I want to pursue. Leena, I'll invite you to chime in first, but then Jody and Zyra, I don't know if you guys remember what you talked about in your research statement, but that might be useful for people to hear as well.
No, I definitely agree. And Hunter, I think your example was perfect. Like, talking about broad social emotional learning would be definitely a little broad. And for my case, I would say somebody saying I'm interested in early childhood education, that's quite broad, but like having a little more specification there, not too much specification, that would be helpful. I think generally we are trying to look at our expertise among faculty to support students when we review applications. So I think providing some tangible ideas, but not too narrow ideas, would be very helpful. Jody and Zyra, do you want to add anything in?
Sure. So let me see if I can remember. I believe in my research statement, my personal statement, I know I didn't have a specific question, and even the general idea of what I was interested in when I first applied has evolved, and it's not what I'm conducting my dissertation on. However, I drew my statement, in my statement I had like general questions, a general interest about college access, and then I gave information about, well, why am I interested in it? What aspects of it am I interested in? So not to bound me to any specific research agenda, but a general idea of what it is that I want to focus on, what it is that I'm interested in. And I think that with my advisor, it helped give him an idea of, okay, one, how do I think? And then two, are my interests aligned with his? And so between that and the interview, I think that we came to the conclusion that we could work well together. So I would say, don't worry about a specific question, but at least have a good grasp of the topic that you're interested in.
I can jump in. I had an idea of what I wanted to study. So I had been a teacher in kind of the more vulnerable part of Philadelphia. And so my passion was always supporting students who are kind of traditionally underserved. I didn't fully know what was possible because I didn't see that many people in the School of Ed who looked exactly like what I wanted to be doing. So I had a sense, and then I kind of followed both like support and from my advisor, but also like my gut to find a path that fit and allowed me to both like fit into the School of Ed, but also develop my own interests. So I think having some kind of like center point that grounds you and keeps you excited, but also recognizing and being able to articulate that you understand that these things will develop as you become a student.
Great, thanks guys. So I'm seeing a question, how would COVID-19 situation influence the number of enrollment and the financial package? You know, incredibly hard to predict the future, as it turns out. I don't anticipate that it will impact either. Things could always change, but at this point, I think it'll be very much business as usual in terms of sort of the size of the cohort that we try and enroll and what the financial package would be. So I'm not anticipating anything new or different on that. And then I think the next question is about GREs. And so I might turn that one over to the admissions folks, because I know it would be worth noting sort of what the GRE expectations are for those people that need to take it.
Sure, I can answer that, Hunter, thanks. So the question is, any consideration for third world country candidates regarding the GRE exam and related course by course equivalents needed versus the economic crisis in terms of inability of money transfer? So a couple of things. We are still requiring the GRE exam as an admission requirement. If you do go on their website, you will see there is an option to take it online, and you can check to see if that option is available where you reside. But that is definitely still a requirement. As far as having the credential evaluation done for your international transcripts, that's still a requirement as well. We do have some noted companies on our webpage, such as World Education Service and I believe it's Credential Evaluators, ECE is the acronym. Those are two that we recommend to do those international credential evaluations. So those are still required as well. And of course, since we do have the application open for the PhD through December 15th, I would encourage anyone that has that requirement of having transcripts that require evaluations to certainly start that process now, because of the effects of COVID-19, everything that is going on globally. You do want to give yourself ample time to have those evaluations done, and of course to take the GRE exam as well.
The next question we have is from Ariel. What sort of supports do you provide for PhD candidates that have families? For example, I see that candidates are eligible for individual health care. Would there be coverage for dependents?
I might turn that over to Jody and Zyra. Can you guys speak to kind of what the package is for your colleagues and if there are sort of like other things that are not in the official package that sort of tend to happen? I think that might be useful for folks to hear as well.
Yeah, we have a number of students who have families, and I think and maybe Zyra knows a little bit more, but I do believe that our package includes families. And in fact, I think that there's also a way to get counseling for your family members through Hopkins and the insurance. Generally, I've been really pleased with the insurance. So I only know positive things, and I do think that there is support for families. I don't know if Zyra knows any more than that.
Yeah, so when we enroll for health benefits, there is an option to add dependents for health coverage. Last year, there was also a fund for to help students pay for childcare. It wasn't a lot, but it was very helpful. So like Jody said, there are a lot of students who have families. I don't know what your other questions are in regards to that, but I guess I think it's good for you to know that it's not something that has been difficult for students. Some students have taken out additional loans in order to help pay for like their family expenses because we aren't allowed to work. However, we did get a raise. Thank you, Hunter. But again, in general, having a family hasn't impeded anyone's progress in the program, nor do I think it has been a factor that has stopped anyone from actually enrolling in our program.
Great, thanks guys. I might actually stay with the two of you for this next question. Best approach for figuring out that sort of like advisor-advisee match. You know, obviously they can kind of scroll through the website. What did you guys do? Do you have other strategies that make sense for people to think about pursuing?
I think the website is really helpful, reading about what people are doing. And one thing to note is that interests change over time. So look at more recent publications in those titles and what they're working on more recently, because there are things that from 5 years ago may no longer be relevant. I recommend trying to talk to one of their students in the process, because students tend to have a little bit more time and they'll give you great insight into not only their experience in the program, but their experience with the advisor. What are they working on? Or those things that might be helpful or interesting for you to work on, and they'll be people you work with pretty closely one day. So I think based on blurbs on bios, and you can even find some people on social media, which can be helpful, gives you some sense of the things that they're interested in. But definitely try to talk to students. That's really helpful.
Yeah, I agree with Jody. Speak to students to get information, but also don't limit yourself to just one specific person. Have an idea of a couple of people that you may be interested in, because advisors don't always take students every single year. And also know that your interest doesn't have to be like in lockstep with your advisors. As you write your statement, think about how does your interests overlap or coincide with what your advisor is interested in, and try to make that very clear, because that can also help open the door to a person who may not immediately see the connection, but it can open the door to multiple advisors who may be able to take you on.
Leena, any thoughts you might add to that one? Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I think those were all great points.
The next question that we have is, how is it determined who must sit for an interview versus acceptance from solely the application packet? I guess that's an answer that you can provide, Hunter.
Sure. I mean, we want to meet all of you guys, so we're definitely going to interview you. So I don't think that anyone is going to be, accepted solely from the application packet. Now, in-person interviews seem a little unlikely given the rate we're going at. So I suspect it'll largely be through Zoom. Yeah, no, we're very excited to, kind of have sit-down conversations, and it's, very much a two-way street, right? You're trying us out, we're trying you out, and trying to, make good decisions about that fit. So that's really part of the process for everyone at this point. Yeah, minimum GRE, just shifting on to the next question. There's no minimum. I think you guys should think about sliding scales, right? So if you're a little weaker on some of your GRE stuff, the admissions committee is probably going to want to see some compensatory merit in other aspects of your application. So I think that's probably kind of the best way to think about it. With that said, I don't know if the admissions folks have some kind of ballpark numbers that might be useful. And yeah, so.
Dr. Galbeck, yes, I agree with everything that you mentioned. Similar to Dr. Galbeck, we don't have like a minimum or a cutoff GRE score. I just want to mention that we do review the application holistically, and one part of the application is not way more than the other. The next question we have is it common for faculty members to co-advise students? And are there collaborative research projects between faculty members in the department?
Leena, do you want to start us out on that one?
Yeah, I would say we have a couple of or a few students having co-advisors, and it is very common to have collaborative research projects between faculty members. So we have a student who has an advisor, but she has kind of interest in more of education policy. So she's also working with faculty at Education Policy Institute. So that like often happens. So students are not restricted to only work with their advisor. We are always trying to give students a lot, like various opportunities whenever it is appropriate. And also faculty members are open to having students in their lab or in their research center, even if they're not their advisee. So I would say this collaboration is very, very common in School of Education.
Great. Jody and Zyra, would you add anything to that from a student perspective?
Yes, I would add what Leena said is completely true. One of the beautiful things about the School of Education is that we are really into collaborating. So I myself work with my advisor, who is the interim executive director of BERC, the Baltimore Educational Research Consortium. And he also works with a assistant professor from the from the Department of Sociology. And so we have weekly research groups with both of their advisees. And then I also work with another assistant professor in the School of Education. So there are a lot of collaborations throughout the School of Education and beyond. That's not something that will limit anyone. So your interests can just reach the sky.
Great, thanks so much. I see we're getting a little low on time, and I know Leena has to go just a couple minutes before 4, so I'm gonna keep us going here. Would students often contact the potential advisor in advance during the application process? Absolutely. I think you definitely want to get to know people and get a feel for them. And, it can be perhaps a little challenging to schedule those, but, try to make it happen. And certainly we will support you. Raven, who I think is on the call here somewhere, and I can kind of connect you with people and facilitate that whole process. And you're obviously welcome to reach out to faculty directly if you want to, although I think ideally maybe you'd, there are some forms that the admissions folks would have you fill out, and that'll probably be the faster, easier, and more reliable way to get in touch with faculty. Is that right, Tanya and Seon?
Yes, there is a form that we'll include in the thank you email, and that is a way for you guys to reach out to faculty. The next question we have is, when does a PhD student need a financial aid or scholarship? And Jody and Zyra too, if you guys want to also talk about your experience as well, that would be helpful.
If I interpret the question correctly, the way it works at our school is that your tuition is paid for by the university, and then we also get a stipend, which we use for living expenses. So it's a fellowship, not necessarily a scholarship. And then then we don't really need financial aid in the most common sense of the word, because our tuition and fees are all paid for. And then also the school also pays for our health insurance out of their pocket. It doesn't come out of our stipend at all. So I hope that answers your question clearly.
And I would just add in that in regular times, there's also students get a small bit of money to facilitate going to a conference in their professional development. So that's another, just small offset that should be helpful. And then there's just above that one, I think, was a GRE question, which I will defer to the admissions folks on.
Sure, I can answer that. Thanks, Hunter. The question, I took my GRE last 2017, but I don't have any copy, and I tried to find it, but I can't retrieve it anymore. Is there a way that I could get my score back from the GRE testing office? So for that, Chaubert, I would definitely reach out to them by going on their website. Typically, you can go on www.ets, that's Edward Tom Sam, ets.org, and find their contact information and reach out to them to attempt to retrieve your score from 2017. Let's see if we have any other questions. We're about to wrap up.
Looks like
10 or 12 months. Oh, that's you, Zyra. Sorry. Let's see that.
Yeah, so we do have breaks. We don't have classes in the summertime, but it's expected during that time that we actually do focus on our research. And this summer, Jody and I spent time writing our comprehensive exams. So it's not like undergrad where it's break, you're still working, you're still earning that paycheck. So
You don't have to be on campus though. Well, it depends on your advisor situation, but
it does depend on your advisor, because I had to show up.
But also in COVID-19, I think things have changed a little bit. But in the summer, you do have more flexibility, even though you're still working very hard.
All right, it looks like there are no more questions. Thank you, Dr. Galbeck, Dr. John, Jody, and Zyra for your time and a wonderful presentation. And thank you everyone again for your interest in the Johns Hopkins School of Education. We look forward to hearing from you. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thanks so much for coming. Really great to meet everyone and get all the questions. Look forward to reading your applications. Take care. Bye-bye.